Hi, and welcome to another episode of Why Australia. This is Lisa Rossmeissl, owner of Boomerang Escapes and your certified Aussie travel specialist. Each week we come here on Sunday afternoons to tell you some of the fascinating places and things you can do in Australia and why you should plan a trip to Australia. This last few weeks we've been focusing and continue to focus on Australia's Northern Territory. It's the big piece in the center. If we look back at the map, it starts about here where you see my hand and goes all the way up to the top. As we referenced last week, that top part is often referred to as the top end, and it was one of our Aussie Lingo lessons. So before we get started with today's topic on some fun things or very interesting things that are integral to the Northern Territory's development, let's start with our Aussie Lingo today. Today's word is Kylie. Kylie is actually the West Australian Nyungar, Aboriginal word for boomerang. Nyungar. Not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, but the West Australian Nyungar Aboriginal word for boomerang. So we all know the boomerang, the traditional one that you throw, but there are actually a variety of boomerangs, and we will cover that another time. But you will find today on the Australia, or on Wednesdays, on the Australia Travel Expert page, the Aussie Lingo lesson, and this week's word is Kylie. Also, if you haven't signed up, we do a weekly adventure newsletter. It does cover things on Australia, but it also covers other parts of the world, tips on traveling. We are a full-service leisure agency. So let's get to today's topic. I want to visit Alice Springs. Alice Springs is probably centrally located. It's right here on the map. So it's pretty much like the heart of Australia, the central geographical part of Australia. It has about 24,000 in urban population, and that's 10% of the population in the Northern Territory. And then Alice Springs itself is completely surrounded by what we refer to the red center, that incredible red earth that I was showing you last week when we were visiting Uluru. So for that, it's integral here and a great stop for you. I mean, not that it's a fancy town or place, but Alice Springs has two things that I would highly recommend taking time to visit that are integral parts of the culture and the development of the Northern Territory. One being the Royal Flying Doctor Service, and the second being the School of the Air. Now, I know I've talked in other episodes about, how remote, and of course, this is a desert environment. So with that being said, I'm going to mention that probably the best time to visit this region is April to October in their cooler months. Otherwise, it is long distances between places. You don't want to be there in the heat of their summer, for sure not. So April to October, when it's their winter time, is the best time to be visiting this region. But these two things, because it's so remote, we just said that like 24,000 is 10% of the population, and this is a desert state. What was developed actually back in the early or late 1930s from John Flynn, who was, let me just get this correct, John Flynn was a reverend that was sent to the bush in 1910, and he actually stayed there till 1951. But what he did was he created originally the Aerial Medical Service at Conclury, and then this later became the Royal Flying Doctor Service. With the remote locations of people, this Royal Flying Doctor Service became very integral in the care of the people who lived out in the Northern Territory. They could be serviced, I think now there's 20 centers throughout the through the outback that service an area the size of Europe. So people would have a radio service, and even today there's still a radio service if you're traveling where you can reach a medical person via radio. They can do a lot of diagnosis via the radio, but obviously, as the name would suggest, the flying service is that these doctors actually fly out to the remote areas when necessary to do medical service. And of course, this was integral in just even setting up and providing social settlements back in the early years of Australia's beginnings. But I can tell you, like, how remote it is. I know I mentioned this in an earlier video. It might have been last season when we did it, when I was visiting the outback in 2015. And we actually were up in Kings Canyon. I'd gotten quite sick, and the tour guide was concerned, but they looked at me and said, it's going to be 2 days before you can get to a doctor. Now, they did set up a doctor's appointment in Alice Springs for me, but that's how remote it is, that you just don't have immediate health care like we're used to here, where you can pop into a minute clinic. These people really have to rely on these services that are provided by the Rail Flying Services. And there's an awesome tourist center in Alice Springs where you can go learn about the history, how it came about, how they operate, the radio system, the medical. And what's great, it's a nonprofit organization, so 100% of your admission fares go back to supply aircraft refurbishment, medical supplies, everything goes back into the services for the people. So, but it's a very interesting thing. They've got a plane in there. I did get to see this back in 2015. Very interesting. And another thing that came about from this Royal Flying Service, and like I said, it's still in existence today. This is still how the people are receiving their medical treatment in the Northern Territory, but is the School of Air. And the School of Air is also still a functioning thing. Of course, it's probably has been modified a bit by technology, but the School of Air developed and began, I want to say around 1951. So to provide educational services to these remote families. It originally began more with radio and doing lessons via radio. The teachers would be in a thing and the kids would get on with radio. Of course, now with all the technology of the internet, a lot of it is done by internet. But again, you can visit the School of Air in Alice Springs. They have it all set up. They have videos, which is really cool. They have videos of lessons that were taught when this thing was first started on, recordings of original teachers that you can hear. You can see students there in the classroom. They have opportunities to buy books. Again, this is another nonprofit organization where the money is going back to the program and supplying the educational supplies and needs for those living in the Northern Territory. So students still are doing, these remote families in the outback and the desert are still learning their school lessons via this School of Air. And like I said, that came about, excuse me, from this Royal Flying Doctor Service, and it's paid. It helped also just with the tourism of Australia as well. I know that the Flying Doctor Services, runs tours every half hour, 9 to 4. I want to say it's under $20 US to visit the museum. Let me just check here quick if this tells me here. I think they go every day. Again, yes, it's same with the School of Air. And it's a great combination. When you're in Alice Springs, you can actually fit both of these tours in together. They can, it's a great family thing. And they accommodate, so whether you're on a bus tour or you're on your own tour, it can be done either way. It can be built into either type of travel to Australia. So those are just two things. I know it's kind of short and quick today, but I really enjoyed these things. I know that I have mentioned before, one of the things that I love, and I think one of the important things about travel, no matter where you go in the world, is to really dive in and get a piece of their culture and learn about their history. And the crazy thing is, the more I travel, the more I find that actually we're all so very similar, and have the same struggles and needs and desires in life. So it's really great to educate yourself and broaden your horizons. For the Red Center, some possible options. I know we've been talking about it, a lot of people on a very popular itinerary, and you can find this on my page, and I might drop it below the video this afternoon after I'm done with you here, would be to do what I call a reef city and outback, and that's where you can get a short highlight in your 9 to 15 day vacation. Do a little bit of stuff in Sydney, in the region of New South Wales, do some stuff up in Queensland and Cairns to see the reef and the rainforest, and then pop over to Ayers Rock, Uluru, and see the Red Center. So that's just some options. Again, I've got a couple itineraries that you can find on my Australia Travel Expert page, or you can find them also on the Boomerang Escapes page, or feel free at any time to use the comment section below to ask me questions if you're interested in visiting the region. I do recommend that you plan ahead for best availability and pricing. And also with this particular area traveling, we always mention to use shoulder season. So this is a great area where you're going to get that value for your money, because the best time to go here is April through October. So April is the shoulder season, and as well as October. All right, take care until next Sunday. Have a great week. This again is Lisa Rossmeissl, owner of Boomerang Escapes. I thank you for watching Why Australia. Bye-bye.